Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Grant Houston, better known as Ace the Architect, and I'm a queer Black and Latino architect, as well as a GSBA member through my own architecture practice, House Cosmopolitan. I am running for mayor because I believe after 4 years of inaction, it is time for a decisive mayor to address our multitude of crises, our affordability crisis, our homelessness crisis, our economic crisis, as well as the climate crisis. And I believe that with my experience as a project manager managing multi-million-dollar contracts, that in this decade of the Green New Deal, I have the leadership, knowledge, and experience to move us forward. And so I look forward to this conversation today and specifically focusing on how my plans for improving small businesses and allowing more of them to happen across the city will be beneficial for all Seattleites.
Great. Thanks for being here with us today, Ace. Our first question to all of our candidates has been, what do you plan to do in your first 100 days as mayor? What are the immediate actions that you'll use your executive authority on? And what will be your first priorities when working with the city council?
Yep. So they are the three things that I launched my campaign with. And those are 1, 2,500 tiny homes in order to treat our homelessness emergency like an actual emergency. 2, a just transition tax. So that is a 1% income tax that we now legally can do to fund 4 major things. And those things are green apprenticeships. So more people getting into the construction trades in order to build the housing that we need. 2, a green building PDA, so public development authority that's focused on not just building green social housing, but also educating our workforce on more sustainable ways to build. 3, business and occupation tax relief. So as we increase income tax, we're reducing that burden, and specifically towards those businesses that are minority and women business owned. So those specific sectors. And then 4th one is to invest $100 million into the Equitable Development Initiative. And so in that way, we have a lot of great projects across the entire city that simply need funding. And so in that way, we are allowing Black and Brown communities to be able to self-determine and create their own projects. And then the third item, which I have, is putting buses back on the ballot in 2022 so that we can restore our service back to what it was before COVID.
Well, I'm digging right into those points there. We've heard B&O tax relief as a common point from candidates for years at every scale. And I don't believe we've once seen it actually proposed once people get into the office. So you've linked it to your 1% income tax in the city there. But can you talk a little bit more about that, how you're going to follow through on your proposal to lower B&O taxes on small businesses?
Yep. So this is actually something I've brought up in a lot of my different proposals, and really how I differ from some of the other candidates is that they are career politicians, they are lawyers, they are people who have committed to things in the past and have not delivered. And that's why I'm running for mayor. With that, in terms of all the plans that I have on my website and all of the policy proposals we have, I have been very clear and open in terms of how we get it actually done. And in that way, making it understood and clear to the community that it's actually going to happen.
Great. So, as the small business owner yourself, and as you mentioned, a participant in our small business incubator, what are the changes you want to make as a mayor that would help queer, trans, and BIPOC entrepreneurs like your cohort in the incubator project do better in Seattle, be able to thrive the way that other businesses are finding opportunity in our, rapidly growing rich city?
Yes. So I would say the primary way that we do that specifically for businesses is improving our permit process. And that is something that I understand not just as a business owner myself, but also as an architect working with other clients and business owners on getting their projects complete. When we make it easier, when we make it more straightforward, that is actually how we allow for more businesses to occur. The other thing I'm really focused on the flip side, is actually our land use and allowing for more commercial spaces in all of our neighborhoods. If we are going to be more sustainable in the future, then everyone within the city needs to be within either a quick walk, bike, or roll of their daily needs. And so that means that we're going to need even more small businesses than we even have currently now. And then in terms of something that's more indirect, what I am really focused on is, of course, affordable housing. And so in that way, really recognizing that when it comes to both our Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, as well as our LGBTQ individuals, that for many of them, they are either in the creative fields or in the arts. And those are things that, as important as they are, don't necessarily bring in a lot of income. And so when we provide them permanently affordable housing, they can actually afford to live in the city.
Well, you're just hitting on all of my future questions here, so this is great. You've proposed naming one of your deputy mayors as a night mayor in charge of nightlife and integrating services for third shift workers in Seattle. So as we come out of this pandemic, which devastated cultural spaces, as you've just mentioned, but most especially those for marginalized communities, what else will you do to ensure that performers, those creative entrepreneurs, those cultural venues, and community-focused spaces are not only able to stay anchored in their existing communities, but also expand?
So I am focused on this in a number of different ways. And so one of them is, of course, land use reform, so we can allow for more housing to happen across the city. And I really bring that up because as someone who actually also resides on Capitol Hill, I have noticed that a lot of spaces have actually closed during the pandemic, not because there was a lack of income, but because their leases were not renewed. In other words, those people who actually hold the land are much more interested in developing housing because there are very few places in the city that you can actually do so. And so when we move that demand to other neighborhoods, we can actually preserve those cultural spaces. The other thing that I'm really focused on is our new cultural public development authority. I believe it's called For Culture, but actually increasing the amount of funding that they have and increasing that to $10 million at least every single year so that we can actually provide resources and grants to small arts organizations and those who are led by traditionally marginalized communities. So in that way, they can actually acquire the spaces that they're in and also develop and expand in the future.
Nice. On a Capitol Hill kind of more specific question, in your website has so many plans for, how you envision the city, and that's great. One that has come up in Capitol Hill over the years is the idea of super blocks. So where, a number of blocks are closed to through traffic, local traffic is slowed but not prevented, and more space is provided for other public uses like walking, biking, street cafes, that kind of thing. These proposals are really exciting to some of our members who see it as a boon to their business, but others are terrified by it because they're not sure if their business model is the right fit for a big change like that. So how would you go about starting super blocks or an equivalent project in Seattle and work with those local street level businesses to ensure that any major changes can bring them along rather than displace them?
So with this, I bring my experience actually serving on the board of the Pike Pine Urban Neighborhood Council. And this was something where before the pandemic, shortly before, Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda had actually talked about wanting to really push this and going after it. And so when I saw that in the news, I brought it forward to our council and I said, we actually need to have this conversation. We need to be in control of this conversation because if not, we're going to be left behind. And specifically because there are small businesses that are going to be concerned about this. And the one thing that I really heard was this concern about parking. And for them, it was saying that, well, most of our businesses or our clients are actually coming from Magnolia, they're coming from Wallingford. And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, if that's where your clients are, if we make it easier for you to actually have a location there, then maybe that's what we should be doing. And so in that way, maybe it's something where the business actually needs to have more opportunities for other locations. The other thing as well is that for many of these projects, and specifically Superblocks, is we have to just do it and we have to just see what the results are. And yes, we should find ways to mitigate, especially when it comes to construction. I know in general that there's actually data that shows when there's construction near a business, they see a reduction in the actual number of clients and number of people who visit. And so one of the things that we can do as the city is actually actively advertise. And so in that way, be part of the help and the solution as we move through this and actually create a better system. And I hope that something that I can also point to is data related to increasing walking and biking to businesses. Specifically, if you increase biking, if you put protected bike lanes in front of a business, they actually see an increase in overall traffic. And so hopefully this will do more harm or more benefits than harm. But again, it's going to be on a case by case basis. And I think for us, it's really just about, we have to do it. We have to finally do the thing that we always have been talking about, but stop the Seattle process and work through it.
Yeah. And so when it comes to Seattle process, you've proposed a new network of the urban neighborhood advocates to encourage that broader participation from Seattle's diverse communities, to try to get those decision-making being done at the lowest level possible and get people involved. We've also seen past efforts at neighborhood level efforts. They've been criticized as being accessible only to a small number of people, being weaponized by a few individuals to resist change, or to slow down public priorities, adding an additional regulatory layer, doubling, tripling that decision time, and creating that famous Seattle process. How do you balance the idea of increasing that neighborhood level engagement and the tremendous diversity of opinion there with actually making that change, making that process, or making that progress for Seattleites?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. And part of the reason for moving towards that model is actually because I want to reduce some other barriers that we're currently seeing. For example, design review. It's such a major challenge for people to think that we're planning on like a block by block basis when we actually should be planning at the neighborhood level. And so that's really where that give and take is that we're going to be removing some other barriers in order to actually build this new process. But what the urban neighborhood advocates should be focused on, and what my plan is, that these are actually paid individuals. This is their full-time job, that they're committed to actually being in a neighborhood and engaging with that community. The other thing that they'll really be focused on is, of course, engaging with those community members, whether they be business owners or residents, in off hours, in off times, so that we're trying to engage multitudes of people and not, again, simply the same, let's say, wealthier, wider individuals who have the free time to be able to engage the process. The other thing that the urban neighborhood advocates and the neighborhood plans would be focused on is forward thinking. So it's really trying to take the major comprehensive plan process and actually make this a continual thing that's happening essentially every single day, and say, okay, what do we want our neighborhood to look like in 10 years? What do we want to look like in 15 years? Because when it comes to a city in general, it's either growing or it's dying. And so let's focus on growth. Let's focus on how we can choose to change and have our neighborhoods continuously improve every single year.
Well, fantastic. So we've got time for about one more question here. I believe you are the only mayoral candidate to propose commercial rent control. Can you tell us a little bit about your ideas there?
Absolutely. So it is something where we actually already have the legal ability to do commercial rent control here. And I know that Councilmember Sawant has been talking about it, and so I'm not sure if she's going to try and beat me to the punch. But what I am really focused on is recognizing that for many of our small business owners, they are just simply tenants for larger landlords. And something that has been happening a lot in the past few years is that local landlords, local property owners are selling to these larger national or international organizations that want to move everyone to a triple net lease and wants to move everyone to a system where it significantly increases the cost to simply try and maintain the business. And so what we are focused on is, especially our small business owners, especially our local business owners, for them to be able to have a way to predictably understand how much their rent could go up every single year. And so in that way, really building in that longevity, especially in Seattle, because we have so many small businesses, so many local businesses that we love and that are a part of our neighborhood and that we want to be a part of our community for many years. And so that is the focus of this plan, is to ensure that that continues to happen.
Well, Ace, thank you for spending the time with us today. That's all the time we've got, but good luck with your campaign.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been a great conversation.